and even UFOs. Thanks so much for tuning in. Friends, I have one of the most important people I could possibly interview on the line right now, and it's my very great pleasure to have him on. It's Clif High from halfpasthuman.com. And of course, you know him from his WebBot work. He's the WebBot creator. And you can buy his Alta reports for a mere $15 each. Clif's YouTube channel is also on fire lately, so you'll want to subscribe to get his Clif's Woojos, which are always informative. His latest video, Attack of the Big G-Spot, was all about how Google is clamping down on true news with their algorithms. Recall in November, Google CEO Sundar Pichai very publicly announced that there is no place for fake news in Google's world. And Clif, you know how much I value your work, sir. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here. I've been listening to you guys for years as I do my toiling here in the data mines. You keep me sane.
Well, you've kept me sane. You know, when I was waking up, I heard you and George Ure on, I believe it was Coast to Coast, back in, I'm going to say, roughly 2010. And one of the first YouTube videos I ever did, certainly it was the first dozen, included sound bites from you and George Ure. I was just so fascinated about your work, and you were already talking about silver back then. So I've been following you for a very long time.
Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're all going to have to sort of follow each other at the moment because Google and the other social media are determined to make us extinct.
Well, they're trying, but, you know, I like how Trump sort of stole the fake news meme from them. Of course, the mainstream mockingbird horror media, which includes Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, the whole litany of the regular mainstream media, of course, tried to label us all as fake newsers. And there's that exceptional Washington Post article, which included 200 sites, of which SGT report was one, which you kindly mentioned in your video, Attack of the Big G-Spot. But Trump sort of took it back and said, no, you're fake news, and I'm not going to take your questions. And I really like that. He sort of flipped the meme on its head, and now he's pointing the finger back at them because they really are the proprietors of real fake news.
Well, and see, here's the real genius of that, and that's why my G-Spot video was done the way it was. And that is because we are facing a situation where for decades, perhaps 10 or 15 decades, it has been the print media and what we now call the legacy media that has been the arbiters and definers of language. And so Trump is exactly correct, because in order to combat them, what do we have to do? We have to take away their main tool. And their main tool is not their broadcastability or any of this. It's the way in which they decide that they're going to define the language. And that's really what has them most irritated, I think, at the moment, is that they've lost control of that. They can no longer define to the population as a whole how we should all think about particular words and contexts and connotations. And so it's been quite shocking to them. Now I think that the tool is liberated. I think we need specific as alt media, or what I'm now starting to call free media. So let's take the language back, right? We're free media. We're simply not corporate controlled. This is an easy identifier. It means that we don't have to explain who we are. They have to explain who they are. They're going to have to explain how they're also free media, and it doesn't wash, right? If you've got a corporate master, you're not free media. If you're free media, you don't have any masters. You own your own language. And so I'm not alt media anymore. I'm in the free media camp. And so as free media, I'm going to start defining the language and make them chase me and try and play catch up. And this includes their the technocratic servants of the alt media, which is Google and Twitter and Facebook and all of these guys. Okay. Now I'm currently under attack at Twitter in any number of ways. They're very subtle. It's not like they're banning me, because that would make it too obvious, so to speak, and cause everything start to go Milo on them, right? And they don't need another Milo happening.
Right.
Okay, so they're now starting to wise up a bit. But I actually heard from some friends of mine that are deep in the belly of the beast that said that there are certain advertisers that are already starting to really sweat it. And the reason they're sweating it is because my big G-Spot video has gone a little tiny bit recognized in the free media community, and some of the people are actually doing that. Because what I suggested in that video was that basically we take control of the language and we decide what means what, where, and we can make Google and all these other places that have to do indexing chase our definitions and connotations. And so in doing so, we redefine the language, and they become the, I don't know what they're going to call themselves. I'm in the free media. I don't know what they are. So under the circumstances, they're going to really sweat it now. And I guess that the advertiser that complained is one of their very large ones. And you can see that certain companies like Procter and Gamble don't want to be associated with Pizzagate. And if we just start talking P&G instead of saying Pizzagate, but every time we're talking about sex crimes against children, we use the words Procter and Gamble or we say P&G, well, pretty soon, then that really pollutes all the indices in the databases all over. And so when they start trying to, one of the things that really gets them, one of the ways in which they're very vulnerable is that they have this mechanism for AdWords. I don't know if you're familiar with how that all works, but you get paid basically because somebody is, as a YouTube guy or if you've got an AdSense account with Google, you get money from them because other people are bidding for the eyeballs that see your website. And that bidding is all done linguistically on words at these at an algorithmic basis within Google's main AdWords algorithms. And so now they're in a real world of hurt because here, all of a sudden showing up alongside their pristine consumer products advertisers are going to be all these very smutty, dangerous kind of references. All of a sudden, Procter & Gamble is going to be bidding against porno sites because we have taken and put in the language that connects Procter & Gamble to sexual deviancy. And we do it by our use of that language. It gets caught up by the algorithms that Google and all these other people run, but they can't control. They can't put in a filter that says, don't make this connection, because then they're starting to chase us even more. And then we just go to some other product or some other one of their advertisers. And the next thing you know, all of their advertisers are bound up in stuff that they don't want to have their names associated with. And this is a real acute problem for Google because Google ran into this thing that they called advertiser friendly. And it was sort of a big deal last year, right? Remember, they would block you, demonetize you, and there was a huge uproar among the big Google guys because all of a sudden, these big Google guys were used to using profanity and so on, and all of a sudden some of the advertisers complained, and Google had to respond, YouTube had to respond, and all these sorts of things, and there was this big uproar as people were like demonetized.
Happening to me still to this very day. Anytime I do a video about Pizzagate, anytime I do a video about, I did one with Bill Holter, and it was just merely titled 2017 Year of Truth Bombs, and that was demonetized as not being advertiser friendly. So yeah, they're on the warpath for us.
Right. Now, of course, here's the thing. Let's get real specific about your stuff and let's step through some things that all of us free media guys can do in our campaigns to deal with this. Okay. So first off, whenever they do that, you immediately respond, right? So you did do that. You responded.
I did. I challenged them and I made them review the video, and then they actually did approve it for monetization after a review with a real human being. But that's how you know their algorithms are picking us up.
Correct. And here's something else. Every time that occurs, you cost them money. Every time that occurs, you will become monetized. All right. Now note this. Once they have a human involved in there, they're vulnerable to a lawsuit. All right. So you could, for instance, demand from them, because the human has been involved and it's not algorithmic, you could demand to know, and I don't know how it would proceed in court, but you have the right to know who is the person that is the arbiter for your product under these circumstances, because they've set it up basically as a board of arbitration. Right. And under the circumstances, then you could say, oh, no, this person has an inherent bias. This person is, XYZ, and their bias is showing up. This is a hate crime against me and my material because this person has this hateful bias against me. And that's all you have to do. And it'll go no further. They'll instantly monetize it and just leave it alone because they've made themselves vulnerable this way. The thing is a tactic. It's one of the tactics that they use in fascism or bureaucracies, which basically are fascism, to slow you down and make you go away. And they know that if they demonetize X number of thousands of videos of people and just keep doing it with an algorithm, which costs them very little money at all to tweak, most of those people will not protest. Most of those people won't take this approach. Most of those people won't be a pain in the butt. The very few that are a pain in the butt, they keep trying to whittle down. So under the circumstances, that's the first thing you should do.
Well, let me jump in and say I really like the idea of challenging them every single time, because I don't always do that. In the ones related to Pizzagate, I know they're not going to get approved because I have challenged them before and asked for a human review, and then it gets banned as for sure not monetizable. But I like the fact that it costs them money. I hadn't thought of that, because I'd love to cost them money. Every time they want to do that and play with us, then we'll just make them, hire somebody. They got to use one of their real employees to review it.
Plus, there's also a review process for that real employee that gets you into committees. Committees cost them big money because they got to go up a notch. They got to, get the higher paying grades down there to start dealing with it. And at some point they will. They will actually allow you to monetize Pizzagate videos, and it'll cost them money both ways. I've got some reports from people that suggest it only takes twice. You only have to do this twice, and they just stop screwing with you. So maybe worth looking at that way. Now, there's another approach to this, though. That is the way I've done it in the G-Spot video. So on your site, just, to be critical, but in a friendly way.
Yeah, fire away.
Okay, one of the things you can do is just change your color scheme a bit, okay? Go to on your site, now let's back up a little bit. The way I work things and the way I've had some success here is by treating social media as a wheel, all right? And so, or a triangle or something. Now, in my particular business triangle here, I have Twitter, I have YouTube, and I have my website. So everybody that I'm going to bring this out that wants to follow this pattern, all you have to do is have your website and then two other forms of social media, okay? YouTube or Facebook, doesn't matter. And what you do is, for instance, on your website, you have links to your social media. So you would have a link for people to sign up to follow you on Twitter. And on your Twitter feed, you would constantly refer people back to your website and over to YouTube. On your YouTube site, you would, every single time you upload a video, you would have a call for following you on Twitter, and you would have a link over to your website. Now, note, I'm not one to talk because I don't ever do this consistently because I'm too damn busy, okay? And usually I just don't give a damn. But this works really well when you consistently apply it, because here's what happens. When anybody comes into contact with you, whether it's coming in through Twitter, whether it's coming in through YouTube, or whether it's coming in through your website, it's sort of a circle. They're led into each of these others. And so that has a tendency to build on itself, just right there.
Right.
Then, because of the way that, so let's back up a little tiny bit and say that Google went through some transformations here as part of their operations last year. And actually it's been ongoing. Okay, but their operations last year, they ran into they basically had a technical obstacle that they'd stepped over, and they made certain decisions. Now, in those decisions, they decided to go mobile first. Okay, so bear this in mind. A lot of the losses that the free media has had on their revenues from AdSense and YouTube and so forth is because we're not corporate. Okay, we don't have people sitting there staying up to minute on the SEO stuff coming out of Google such that we can alter our websites to stay current with them.
Oh, right.
Now,
yeah.
Okay. Now,
my website is a dinosaur, by the way. My WordPress template is so old that it's not even mobile friendly, and I need to pay somebody to upgrade it, and I'm happy to do that. It's hard to find trustworthy people that have the time to help you out and do that, though, even when you're willing to pay. So the other thing is that you're right. The corporate media. Here's the thing about Truth Media: we don't get $1 million paychecks to spew CFR talking points, and that's what makes us the Truth Media. That's why they hate us.
Right. Well, and so some practical tips for you, because I've been doing this stuff for a long time, right?
Yeah, please.
One tip is, if you need good quality labor and smart labor to do your website for you, get on Upwork, which is a freelance site, and look for some of the web guys in Romania, Bulgaria, this sort of thing. Most of them are extremely well-spoken in English, near native fluency. Many of them can even do translations for you, but they've got this stuff down, and they do it very well. They're going to be slightly more expensive than the same kind of talent that you might get out of India, but you'll have less language issues because they speak British English, and the Indian people have a tendency to design websites a particular way that is a little bit more garish, a little bit more colorful and attractive, but also doesn't seem to fit in as much with the Western mindset, whereas the Romanians and these guys do really good work. So just a thought there. Now, as far as Google is concerned, this mobile first stuff is a big deal, guys. So you've got to get that done right away, and you'll see your web traffic go way up. And here's the reason. Google has this idea that their goal, and I like it. I mean, I like their stated manifest goal, which is to provide the best possible search experience and get you the link you really want, that you really need, okay? And to do that, they've set themselves this task of delivering authentic or original links and not game players. So Google struggles all the time. I don't know how much of their staff is involved in this, but they have a continuous problem with people that are gaming the system. So, for instance, an easy way to game a YouTube system would be to set up a bot watcher in Vietnam Vietnam or Philippines. And this is a PC that just logs in and watches your YouTube video all day long, swapping IP addresses as rapidly as it can to trick YouTube into thinking that there's been millions of viewers and you haven't gotten that. And that gets you free money, so to speak, right? It hangs around on a YouTube video just long enough to get the ad, and it clicks off and gets a new IP address and goes at it. So those kind of gaming things are a real problem for them. It costs Google money. That's like outright fraud these people are trying to perpetuate. And so they have to fight that. And it's led them to have a particular attitude, which I must, because I've done that work myself. I've done security for government and corporations at a tech level. And this is just an aspect of it because, there's all different kinds of fraud. I used to have to protect money for government through secure channels. And so there were all kinds of fraud things going on. So I sympathize with them. Having to do that, though, means that they've got this huge operation proportionately that's devoted to making our site secure and meeting our goals and so on. That group has been given the task of this political hit job on free media by the legacy bad guys. Now, their job is not easy because the kinds of language we use, in fact, is real news. And so, for instance, imagine their problems. They not only have to deal with Pizzagate being an advertised word in many alt media sites, put up there, but they also have to deal with it within the language itself, as all these places talk about it and so on. So they have to index all of this. And so they have to push it down in the indices and do all this monkeying around with their algorithms, which blows back on them because it causes problems with their real business ventures, which is feeding up those ads. And so if we can tie as free media, we can just screw their system all to hell and gone within a very short period of time, well, like probably not more than a month or so, and then they have to redo it all. Because the tying of their advertiser names into things that are not advertiser friendly blows that central algorithm. So here you're going to find a situation where they may even have already encountered it, where their algorithm for AdWords pops up and tries to buy time on somebody's site, and here it is, Procter & Gamble versus sex toy sellers versus something else. And who's willing to pay the most money? And all of a sudden, Procter & Gamble and then there's the other side of it. All of a sudden, Procter & Gamble ads are suddenly showing up on sites that are pornography and advertising sex toys and so on. So they get polluted and they get really pissed at Google. And it goes from there.
Right. I liked your idea. I wrote that down. Pizzagate equals PG equals Procter & Gamble. And again, this idea of the Procter & Gamble's ads coming up on inappropriate sites has nothing to do with us wanting to peddle porn. It has everything to do with Pizzagate and associating PG with Pizzagate and Procter & Gamble and sort of tricking the system that way. I just want to say this. It seems that the powers that be, the deep state, actually the corporatocracy, the fascist oligarchy is circling the wagons here as it pertains to this conversation, because we have Apple CEO Tim Cook saying fake news is a chief problem that needs to be tackled. And of course, that's on the back of Sundar, the Google CEO, in November, saying there's no room for fake news. And now today, former Google CEO and current executive chairman of Alphabet, Eric Schmidt, says, quote, "When people built the internet, they forgot about the bad guys," end quote. So they really are circling the wagons. They're not going to let this go, are they? I mean, we're just going to have to take the fight to them.
Correct. Yeah. They can't afford to let it go. You're quite correct.
Is it because their kingdom is falling apart, though? Because no one believes them.
Correct. They're in a situation where they're in denial about what's actually going on. It's like when people go into war, or when you're in a personal combat situation and you're doing fighting and stuff, at some point it becomes evident to the guy who's losing that he's losing. Personally or in a collective group, and that at that point the mindset really changes. And so we've seen that within the language recently as what I call faction A for asshole, has been defeated, right? And so they're circling. They won't let it go. They're going to keep fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting all the way down, because they have no choice. Because at their core are people that will be going to jail if they are lucky. Otherwise, they will be killed for treason or for their horrible crimes against people and humanity and so on. I mean, this is where it ends up. At the core of that group are really nasty, evil people that are trying to protect themselves, and they'll do so for years or whatever it takes. Eric Schmidt and his comments about and the other comments about fake news and so on, these guys see they're already behind the curve. By the time it reaches up to the corporate CEO level, It's got to work its way really basically all the way through some layer of that corporation up to meet these guys. And these guys are already still using old language, so to speak, right? In the free media, we're nimble, we're fast, we can change. Okay, so Procter and Gamble, they get on our good side, we drop them, and then we just pick another P&G for Pizzagate, or give it another language, another slang term, and off we go. They cannot win. The bad guys in this sense cannot win. They don't recognize that yet at Eric Schmidt's level, or the CEO level, because, it takes a long time for the blood to fall off, after that throat's been slit, right? And then it keels over. And that's what's going on here, is we're taking their language away from them. Now, real quick here. So let's just do some real quick things for the free media guys. So make sure that you do your mobile first focus. Let's eliminate all of the problems that would come from us if we were just regular corporate guys, or, a shoe sales fellow, right? If we were just a local business trying to do stuff, we still would need to have a mobile first friendly page. Mine is ghetto. I mean, it is ghetto, but it loads easily on a phone, and 85% of my traffic is on phones now, and that's not true 5 years ago even. So right. It's really kicked up. Make sure that all of your links are HTTPS. Okay, go to the secure socket layer. Make sure that you don't have any of the HTTP links alone, okay? Because Google's going to get to the point here real quick, and they send out notices. If you go to the SEO conferences or online and stuff, they'll tell you what all this stuff is coming, when the deadlines are. You can look on Google's site, and so you can do things to make your site more Google friendly and get over this base layer, okay, so that it's not any technical thing that's causing you problems. And then we can concentrate on the political. And then the other thing, especially for the YouTube guys, is get descriptions in there. Make sure your descriptions are accurate. This is where you control the language that Google has to index about your YouTube video, so use it to your advantage. And also make sure you put your tags into the descriptions and use your tags effectively. And there's any number of regular corporate style videos out there as to how to do this sort of thing for uploading to YouTube, and usually it's entitled, get more YouTube followers, or 10 tips, or whatever. And you want to do these basic things for your site. Once you do that, you'll see that you'll get a small rise and things will be somewhat stable. Then make sure that all the links in your website are good, that if you have an image, you have an alt textual tag for it. For instance, if that site that's viewing it wouldn't load that image, Google wants to know you've got alt text that says image should be here, or, this is a picture that you can't see of a toad or a frog or something. Okay, and then for your site specifically, it is known that you can attract attention visually, especially in instances on your website and in YouTube, by using the color of yellow over red. If you're going to use red, shade more towards rose, which is more acceptable, more trustworthy. Bright red is attractive, but it's also controversial, brings in a little bit of a jittery feeling, and so on. So there's these things you can do on your site. Anytime you put up a video, if you're in the free media, use a diagonal somewhere in your thumbnail. I would say that probably the best thing to do maybe would be to do a yellow diagonal with black letters on it, with the main subject line or some attractive word that's going to cause people to look at it. This yellow-black combination buys you an additional 20 milliseconds as that eye is scanning across there. And so you'll do things like this. Okay, so that really goes to the basic level there. Now,
and by the way, guys, I just want to jump in and say Clif is just being generous here to share this information with all of us in the alt media. So for those of you that don't have your own websites or YouTube channels and are just here for the ride to listen to Clif because you love Clif, we're going to talk about Pizzagate, Silver Gold, Bitcoin, the Deep State, Breakaway Civilization, Antarctica. I'd like to cover it all if we have time. So hang in here with us because this is important stuff. We are going to try to take the fight to the oligarchs and to the fake media, and this is how to do it. So we'll round this out, and then we'll get into the juicy stuff for listeners.
Yeah, there's only just a couple of more items here real quick.
Yeah, but thank you for this, Clif, because it is important information. I really appreciate it.
Well, I get, and I feel bad for a lot of the guys that are in their 20s and 30s and so on, right? I'm a little bit more settled. It hits me less. And some of these guys have lost 80% of their income in the last 6 months. One guy wrote me and he had quit his job in June, was doing fine. His wife quit her job in early December. She was able to get it back, but because their income plummeted so much these last couple of months, she had to go back to work because their dreams were shattered. And this is a guy in the free media space. I won't go into his name, but anyway, so real quick here. So our Procter & Gamble thing works. Go and look at my video for all the guys in the free media on the big G-spot. It'll give you some other tips there. And here's something to know. When you're doing your descriptions and stuff, if you were to put in an actual legalistic kind of a description as to what Pizzagate actually is every time, instead of using Pizzagate or some other term like Procter & Gamble, if you were to just put in a legalistic description like this video explores, or is a documentary exploring the potential for alleged, sexual abuse, blah, 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 and you did it as though it was that kind of a thing, you're going to get a different categorization on that video within the YouTube as well as Google. And you'll find that you're getting into an entirely different audience just by changing the language and how it manipulates their algorithm. So you can use both of these, put in multiple different descriptions of that video within the description space. It'll take a lot of text in there. So use it. You can pre-can these things and just plop them in. Legalistic phrasing is what I call long-term values. So long-term values are much better than using slang, which is the immediacy values, because they're savvy to this. If you're talking immediacy, PewDiePie kind of stuff, they know it's a flash in the pan, it's trending, but they don't have to deal with it 3 weeks from now. Okay. The other hand, though, if you're talking about some of these legalistic language, more corporate talk, then you're up with the big boys where they want to keep that video up there circulating year after year after year. And it can even impact your trending associations within their algorithm this way. Okay, and then language ties to corporation sponsors in order to get polluted both ways. And then here's one last thing. If any of the free media has a problem this way and they have a little bit of money, they may want to actually consider buying advertising. And I say this very judiciously. I was able to get 82.5% conversion rates off of Twitter. And I use Twitter engagement in the Twitter ads. People that do this will know what I'm talking about. And I was able to get an 82% conversion rate, which would lead to tens of thousands of views. So, and it was on cheap keywords. And I'm not touting my own product, or rather I'll do it this way. Anybody in free media that's suffering, if I've heard of your website and you write to me and say you're going to take the advertising approach, I'll give you a free copy of my book on advertising, and I'll give you a year's access to my software to use the Twitter feed with my weighted algorithm on there to get the keywords so that you can, take these guys on. And it's a cooperative effort. This is enlightened self-interest. The more that they use the book, they'll tout it more and so on. So I don't mind giving it away. See, so.
Cool. That's very generous. That's awesome.
Okay. And now we can go on to the other woo-woo stuff.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Twitter, and I called up an email that I sent to my two compadres on SGT Report, Matthew and Peter, actually last night. And it said this: please follow these folks on Twitter to stay up to date on Pizzagate. They're breaking news. And I'm going to just try to run through this list. It's an incomplete list, but these people, I got to tell you, Cliff, what's going on Twitter right now is just incredible, and it's hard to keep up. It's impossible to keep up, but I think Angela Pizzagate is not manipulated 7. Then there's a gal at Susie Dowd.
Yeah, Susie Dowd. Yeah.
Incredible. At Zanting, at Dern Exit, at Dawning Psalm 63, and Thomas Burnpain. These people are breaking Pizzagate news all day long, every day. I mean, they're doing a better job than I can because I've got so many other, irons in the fire. I'm trying to do all this stuff. I got the website, I got the YouTube channel. I'm doing an interview with you right now, and they're breaking news on Twitter. So here's the question. What is the WebBot's data suggesting about Pizzagate, about Podesta, about WikiLeaks, about Comet Ping Pong, about any of this, what I'm now calling Pedogate? It's the global pedophilia ring, which I don't think the elite can hide at this point. It's obvious what's been going on.
It's out. It's broken. We knew this. The data, actually, I think maybe I talked about it in October or November, and the data set said basically said, okay, it's coming out. Now I have an issue here, okay, because I don't want to pollute the stream. Right, the people that are out there actually doing the work in law enforcement and so forth, they've got to follow on that, which is the prosecutions and so on, and so. I occupy a kind of a weird position in that people are already referencing some of my work in court cases, which really kind of freaks me out. So I've just got to be a little bit careful there. We've got a lot of data and stuff in here about what's going on, but I'm not going to get into personalities for obvious reasons as a result of that. But we have a major milestone coming within the chaos of this summer. All right. So there's going to be a prominent death within the community of abusers that will occur sometime, according to our data sets, before mid-June. And that's not the break, okay? That's just going to be a big gasp for everybody because it's going to hit them at a huge level emotionally. So I have a very high number on this as for emotional impact, and that's as much as I'm going to say about it. Now, the other side of that, though, is that after this temporal marker goes, the what we can call, the pedo gate, it gets really very large in a way that it does not now, to the point where even the corporate captive media are forced to deal with it, and that alone is going to cause huge problems for them. So as regards to the free media and all of those people that in the free media that are really pissed at the big old broadcast media, by the time we get into October, November, the whole pedo thing will have rolled through broadcast media, and we will have a bunch of big gaps, a bunch of big holes in what used to be the broadcast airwaves. And it's because these people are dirty, not just, they're complicit. And so we're going to have all kinds of stuff. We've got data sets for suicides, willing and unwilling, all this sort of thing. And it's going to be quite shocking to the sleeple that wake up next year and look around and say, okay, what's going on here? And it's because they're just not paying attention to how deep it goes. But by my estimation, we don't get numbers, but I get so many different names in our model space and stuff showing up in here that by my estimation, maybe a third of what we would consider to be broadcast on-air personalities, and maybe that many professional politicians are going to be gone by the end of the year.
Yeah, good. Well, I don't know if that's related to Pizzagate or Pedagate, but I have said this, and I'll say it again because it's on the record. Jake Tapper at CNN has a wife named Jennifer who did a interview with Washingtonian a year before Pizzagate, and she named Comet Ping Pong as their favorite family restaurant. What are the chances in a city as big as Washington, D.C., with all those fabulous restaurants, world-class restaurants, that is the restaurant she would have cited? Yeah. What are the chances? I mean, is it any wonder that Jake Tapper doesn't want to talk about Pizzagate or Pedagate? I mean, I'll tell you what, at this point, it's got to be clear to any thinking person with two brain cells rubbed together that CNN equals CIA. I mean, it couldn't be more obvious. I mean, could it? I mean, what do you think about CNN?
I try not to.
Okay. Yeah,
I haven't turned on any of that stuff in a long time. So I try not to waste my time with them. They are indeed, corporate controlled, captive media, and a dangerous thing. It's kind of like, no, I don't want to light a fuse on that stick of dynamite.
Well, I said that Trump should probably, I don't know if this legally he could actually do this, but he should get the FCC to not renew their license to broadcast for state security, because they literally are the vipers at the door. They're it's the demons at the door, and they're breaking down the door. They're trying to, tear down the CIA Mockingbird media in general. It's not just CNN, let's be clear. But that is the problem, is that these people are aligned against the Republic. They're aligned against truth. They're aligned against the people. And they have a geriatric audience. They must absolutely be freaking out as they look at the statistics. I mean, Zero Hedge alone has to be eating CNN.com's,
Oh yeah.
on a daily basis. They're watching the truth media grow as they're watching their geriatric audience die off. If you watch CNN, the average commercial all day long is, I always like to cite the Humira commercial. 30 seconds about how it may cause new or worsening forms of heart failure and rare forms of cancer.
Right. And then the next commercial is, by the way, here's your, Medicare Part B insurance upgrade.
That's right. All right. Well, so right now, trending today, I just want to mention this, is this allegedly a video that may or may not be John Podesta's voice. It sure sounds like it. The voice analysis is being done, audio analysis, comparison. It sounds like John Podesta, and it's whoever it is, it's a demonic individual berating children, screaming at children.
You will call me? There. Just get lost. Just get lost.
But these truth researchers who I cited on Twitter, the great people over at Reddit and Vote and 4chan, they are not going to let this go. They will not let it go. I've said it's the biggest story right now, Cliff, behind 9/11. 9/11 Truth and Pizzagate. two biggest stories that I think can be followed.
Yeah, I think 9/11 Truth's could be overwhelmed because you're just looking at this from the Western-centric world. There are people all around the planet investigating this. The connections, especially between our Pedogate guys and Southeast Asia and the Caribbean for child trafficking, are going to bring in, and now you've got international people. And let me tell you, I would not want to be on the bad side of some of these guys out of Haiti because somebody crossed the line down there. I heard from a friend of mine. I've got friends in low places all around the planet. Okay,
friends in low
just that
places.
kind of guy, right?
Yeah.
You know, we share scars together. So anyway, but I got a friend down in Haiti, but he was telling me that somebody irritated. I guess you'd call them warlords or criminal gangs, and they've got their version of a to be killed fatwa out against some of the people that are involved in Pedogate. So see, it's that level of stuff coming out now. And basically, the people at the top, we're looking at empire here, and it's foolish for us as Americans in USA pop to buy into and believe all the crap we were taught in high school, because they taught us an illusionary world where we were the good guys, we were pristine, and so on and so on. And we're as dirty as the Roman Empire. We got people up at the top of our power structure that are worse than Caligula. Caligula could take lessons from these guys, right?
That's right. But we got to stop using the word we. And I mean, I know that you
Exactly.
don't really mean we, because it's not we, it's the deep state. And, you
Yes.
know, George Webb is just moving mountains, peeling that onion. I mean, he's using language that I've never seen used before. Every video I'm learning something new. I didn't know that DynCorp was running, you know, child trafficking rings around the world, and he's pointing the finger squarely at DynCorp, mentioning the name. And God bless him for doing it, because he's obviously risking his own life. And you know what? It's waking people up with facts. The fake media cannot defeat us when we share facts.
And there's the problem, though. You're going to run into this attitude from the captive media and their adherents, where they say, well, I don't want to discuss details.
Right.
And it's like, well, wait a second. Details equal facts. If you're not willing to discuss facts, then I can't discuss anything with you, because you're not going to be able to change my opinion without details. And if you won't listen to them, I can't change yours. So there's really no point to continuing. And we run into this anti-dialogue kind of thing going. That our data actually shows that changing as we get through, let's say, October-ish. So we have these two big areas of chaos showing up in our data for this year. And one of them runs from March, and we're just about ready to get into it, all the way through into May. And then we have sort of a little hiatus in the chaos build through summer, but that's a hiatus in the chaos relative to political and social. There's going to be all kinds of seismic activity, weather activity to give us other sorts of chaos. And then in the midst of all of that, we have this like breakdown that comes in September, October, November. And during that period of time, a number of indicators in the data sets are suggesting that the narrative wars shift over. Okay, so right now we've got a situation where Faction B defeated Faction A through this past year, and we're in a different political environment. By the time we get to the end of this year, we'll be in a different narrative environment, as Faction B will have consolidated the power. Certain events will have occurred extraneous to both Faction A and B, and we'll be at a point where the narrative will be shifting over. And this is where years and years and years ago, if you've been listening to my stuff for a decade or more, you'll know that we used the term re-education camps without understanding what it was. I thought it was going to be, you know, people like myself getting stuck into camps to be re-educated by the deep state. But the really cool part is that these long-term data sets are actually now manifesting. They're shifting into shorter-term and immediacy data. We're starting to get into more some details. And so the re-education is going to be like a re-education effort. It's tied up with this Antarctica, but it's also tied up with the Pedogate. And we could think of it as like having come through the South Africa experience and having to go into a truth and reconciliation period without necessarily the formal structure that they had, right? And we're going to have to go through that same truth and reconciliation, and re-education is going to be part of it. And it's going to hit the people that are a lot younger than myself a lot harder, because they're going to think that they're savvy. They're going to think they know what's going on. And the data is suggesting that they're going to be blindsided by what all the stuff that's coming out about, you know, the pedophilia, the hidden deep state operations, Antarctica, space aliens, all of this kind of stuff. And they're just going to be gobsmacked.
Good. I hope that happens, because I'm still stunned by the fact that even some of the people that I listen to, other podcasters out there, some of the biggest names out there, Joe Rogan being an example. So many of these people, and he's more enlightened than many, but so many of these people can't see that Hillary Clinton and the deep state are the corrupting influence on our government. And they're so blinded by their hatred for Trump, not specifically Rogan, but others are so blinded by their hatred for Trump that they are, I guess, just instinctively running the other direction to Hillary, saying that everything would just be, wonderful if Hillary was the president, when you and I both know that she represents the deep state. And it's right now, I believe it's Obama, Hillary Clinton, and George Soros that are affecting what's going on right now, trying to topple Trump, trying to light the fires of impeachment to get him out of office. I mean, the point being that I hope people wake up to the fact that the deep state is real, and it stands in opposition to everything we as sovereign citizens and Americans represent.
It's awful hard, though. I mean, here's our problem. You're quite correct. I like Joe Rogan. He's a great Paul guy. Love his podcast, and he's a martial artist, right? Yeah. So this is cool. But I've noticed some things in his language. Like, for instance, he's follows the party line on global warming. It's like with all it's a settled science. It's a settled science. It's a settled science. We can't debate it. It's incontrovertible. That's right. And see, this is something that really irritates me, right? I don't care if you're Sir Isaac Newton and you've just made up some new law. The real crime you commit is not trying to foist your understanding of gravity on the rest of us, but rather making that law incontrovertible, so we can't ever discuss it thereafter. And this is where we are with Western, quote, science. It's a religion. It's not a science. These people have vested interest and all this kind of stuff pulling the strings. And it's unfortunate that even enlightened people like Joe Rogan run into this, where their minds are altered by the continual barrage of the language. And this is why taking the language back frees your mind up. This is also why I don't give Joe Rogan any grief for this, because it's a continuum. When you get into the awakening, you think, oh, well, it's just this. And then it's just that. And then you say, well, there's a hole down there. Let me stick my head in. Right. Next thing you know, your feet are wiggling in, and you're just trying to see how far down it goes. Right. So, so he'll get there, I'm certain. One little crack breaks all the rest of it.
Well, and I should just say, I like Joe Rogan too. I think where the reason I wanted to bring him up is because he does exactly what you've said, is that he's closed-minded on certain issues like vaccines, like geoengineering, like the science is settled. When I know he's more enlightened than that. I mean, he used to question the Apollo landings, and now he's sort of come full circle on that. And he says, okay, I was wrong, we went to the moon. And it's like, well, I sometimes feel like, who got to Joe? I mean, I don't think anybody got to Joe. I think he's just so successful, and he's getting, so many views that he realizes he needs to sort of come back to that centrist line just a bit, just to stay off the radar of the bad guys. That's sometimes how I feel about Joe Rogan.
I'm sure he has business issues in terms of how he guides his shows and who he deals with, but he's extremely good at it. I mean,
he's very smart. I like him a lot. I guess I should have mentioned Mark Maron as being the better example of somebody who's towing this Hillary Clinton line. Give me Hillary, anybody but Trump. And it's like, she's certainly as evil as Trump, if not 1,000 times more evil. Anyway, I digress.
Well, I think of Trump as being human. I'm not sure about these other guys.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that.
And humans, of course, you got to cut them slack. We screw up all the time.
No, it's absolutely true, and it is, it's a continuum. We're all learning as we go, and I've been following you for so long, and one of the things I woke up to early on was the silver story, and then I heard you talking about silver, and we know how manipulated it is. Bix Weir just did a video talking about how COMEX derivatives in 2016 were up 41%. They have to throw so much paper now at the market to cap the prices of gold and silver that it's absolutely stunning to anybody paying attention. And by the way, we should talk about Bitcoin. Because of you, I have actually purchased some Bitcoin because you have been right about very many things. And I want to give you credit, Clif. That 888 back dip down on Bitcoin, you hit that nail on the head. But let's talk about $600 silver, which I think is what the web bots are predicting.
And we've had that since 2002, probably. And I first spoke about it on, I think it was Mysteries of the Mind radio. In 2003, there was a juxtaposition of 20,000 on the Dow, which in 2003 was absurd. Everybody thought I was crazy. I got grief for that for a decade. And I got grief for the $600 silver call. We should be at that $600. If we were to look at the Bix Weir video and just do the math that he's talking about, we should be well over 600 in silver now, maybe twice that, who knows? And so the data sets still continue to show silver with that emotional level at the 600 plus. Now I am getting numbers that show this year we'll crack 145. We'll bust through 145 in US dollars per ounce of silver in some form. We may still have silver at $18 and then the rest of it is premium. I just don't know how it's going to work out. It may be that we actually have an open market for the first time ever and we scale through 145 in a matter of minutes, but that number does show up. So it'll be picked up somewhere in the media and broadcast back. That's sort of the little feedback loop we get with our data sets. And at this point, then I'm looking at the other, and so that's sort of a temporal marker, this 20,000 Dow, $600 silver, and all of that leads us up into the big moves for Bitcoin early through next year. And we're looking there. The last number I had that was effective, I think, I actually calculated it out because the Bitcoin is coming in yuan. I have to go into a yuan to dollar conversion. So at the time I looked, the forecast would have been something around $13,000 per Bitcoin sometime February, March-ish of next year.
I actually don't think that that is a stunning prediction to the degree that I've been following Bitcoin now so closely, and it appears to be, I've said in interviews, I think it could go to 10,000 as easily as zero. I mean, I think, and I don't think Bitcoin's going back to zero. There's too much interest because you notice as China clamped down on Bitcoin and the fake Bitcoin exchanges and whatever was happening there, Japan picked up the slack. So now Japan is acquiring Bitcoin hand over fist. The Japanese are, because they can see what's going on with Abe and the insanity with the yen, and the Japanese government's buying up all the stocks, and people are losing their minds because they know what's coming. What's coming is hyperinflation.
I don't think that that's it, actually. I don't think that I don't think the Japanese are seeing that. I think that what they did was that they got a copy of that Chinese white paper that was produced maybe January or February of last year. There was this white paper that came out and circulated in PBOC, and it had the most staggering plan you could ever imagine, okay? And it basically said if we, China Pop, were to take over Bitcoin and evenly distribute it, we could evenly distribute it in like 4 different ways through our social order and in essence empower the whole nation with a stable currency that once it reached this particular point would be so stable for decades we wouldn't have to worry about all of these the whipsaw actions of currencies. It'll keep us digital. You wouldn't believe it. There must have been 200 positive benefits from this plan that were listed in that white paper. And I think the Japanese are reading that, or at least someone in officialdom in Japan has read it, and they're starting to go that way. Because one of the things that that I took away from the white paper was that if they had one whole Bitcoin in each of these various regions, then each of these villages would be basically a millionaire when this particular Bitcoin reached $1 million, and that would provide the following benefit for the village, even if they never spent the Bitcoin. It would be basically as though they had $1 million worth of gold sitting there, and then one day everybody recognized it was worth $1 million, and then they could loan against it and do all this kind of stuff against it. And so the Chinese have this long term. I mean, we're talking, I think they talked about 4 or 5 year plans in there. So this is a 20-year plan.
All right, so guys, I know you can't see me, but Cliff can, and my mouth was hanging open during that. I hadn't heard that. That white paper came from the People's Bank of China?
It was written by a minor functionary in the PBOC. It was a limited circulation. I got a very badly translated copy, and then I asked the guy, and I got some of the original text. I will see if I can locate the title. I was never given the title page or the name of the author, but there was some slip-ups in there, and I think I've sussed out who the author is. But I don't want to say because they're so closed mouth about it. But I will see if I can get that translation and put it on my site or send it to you or something so that we can get it out and about.
Okay, thanks, because I just want people to know where I'm coming from on Bitcoin. As Cliff said, we're all on a continuum and we can all learn as we go. And so I was very close-minded about Bitcoin early on. One of the early adopters I give credit to is Brother John F., who talked about it and followed Bitcoin, even started a Bitcoin channel. But then Bix Weir kind of came on board, and Andy Hoffman opened up his mind to Bitcoin, and I'm not a stupid person, so I'm like, I'm not going to sit here in my little camp saying Bitcoin's not real money. I'm just going to be gold and silver. I'm going to expand my mind a little bit. I'll buy a little Bitcoin as a bet, as a lotto card. It's a lotto card in case it does. Look, there's only 16 million Bitcoins, I believe, in circulation right now, and they're going to be capped at all time, guys, at 25 million Bitcoins. Think of the population of China alone. I'm just saying you might want to buy a Bitcoin just to have some skin in the game.
And our data sets are so solid on Bitcoin that I've been recommending it to people every chance I got since 2012, really since late 2011 with some of my private clients. And then I just went public with it in early 2012. I accept Bitcoin on my site and deal in it whenever I possibly can. But here's the real kicker. Our data sets are insistent that Bitcoin will become so well used that we're going to invent new words for it. And so once we start altering our language for a commercial product, then I know it's ingrained into the culture. I don't know what those new words are, but we're going to have a new word for decibits and a 10th part of a Bitcoin, and then for millibits, the millionth part of a Bitcoin. So we'll have this, or excuse me, decibits. So those will be first, and then we'll get into the million parts, and it'll be slang. It'll be whatever, like give me a buck, only it'll mean, a millibit.
I want to say this too as it relates to Bitcoin. So we know the dollar is long in the tooth, and right now maybe it's the best of the worst. But between the US dollar, the yen, the euro, the yuan, all fiat currencies eventually die. So Bitcoin, let's say it is left standing, and let's say that it creates all of these new millionaires, even if it's just because the dollar hyperinflates. And so whereas it used to be $1,000 to buy a Bitcoin, now it's $100,000 because the dollar is losing so much value so quickly. That's one of the reasons you want Bitcoin. It's certainly one of the reasons you want to own some silver and gold in physical form. But let me ask you this, Cliff. What is your gut feeling on Bitcoin? Do you think it was part of the plan to psychologically prepare people for a cashless society? I mean, we don't really know who created Bitcoin. Do we? Maybe we do, but I wonder if this isn't all part of the plan to move the world towards a cashless society and, frankly, get some of the people on our team cheerleading for it.
That may well be the case. That would go to intent. I just couldn't say. I do know that I'm not in the camp that thinks that Satoshi Nakamoto is a group. I read the white paper in 2009. I've read it repeatedly since. I've subjected it to my analysis. It's a single mind. Okay, that's a single voice in that white paper. The linguistics would suggest that. So was it prompted? Was that a face, a beard on a CIA or NSA op or whatever? I don't know, but I do know this. It's not feasible for us to have a cash society dealing in species, paper and this kind of thing, off-world. Just makes no sense whatsoever. Humanity has to go off-world. We're right at that cusp. So I'm all for the cashless society. I'm all for getting rid of the little bits of paper. That's why I'm so big on Bitcoin, because I don't want the bastards controlling my money anymore, and I'm now my own central bank. I can't think of who it is that keeps saying that, get Bitcoin to be your own central bank. But one of the guys out in the free media does that, and I'll see if I can remember who it was. But that's my motto now, is that I'm my own central bank with Bitcoin, and I can take my Bitcoin and I can go and make a transaction on Jupiter when I can find that concierge up there to point me at the right place to get what I want, right? And because it'll work up there. We've got to stay digital. The technology's not going away. The idea that we're going to have a major crash and that the world is upended and that gold and silver are real money and so forth, all of that is quite accurate. But on the other side of it, it is not an old barter economy. It is not a crash back down. In my way of thinking, humanity is at the cusp, all right? I mean, I'm not bullshitting, guys. We either overcome this stuff in the next few years, say by 2029, or we're finished as a species. And I mean, people will die by the billions just because the system will break down. We can overcome this. There's many different approaches to getting our way out of this situation, but it won't be by going back and trading cabbages for silver for, bullets. It's not going to be that world. It's going to be sci-fi world that's been chosen by Faction B, and they're going to put all their energy in there, and I'm with them. Okay, I'm on board on that train. We've got to get off planet. We've got to go sci-fi world. This means we've got to be smart, effective, and digital, give up a lot of our prejudices. Yes, silver and gold are money. Yes, they're going to continue to be money, but get smart and get some electronic leverage against them in the form of Bitcoin so that you can be mobile, so you can go on out and interact with this world. Plus, if we're correct, those people that bought Bitcoin way back when will find that Bitcoin scales up not only because of hyperinflation, but because of true value, because it's offering more and more to the planet as the network builds out. This network effect is very powerful. So in that regard, like I say, I'm all for getting rid of cash. The convenience of just aiming your phone and sending a couple of Bitcoin is really cool. But I don't like the idea of, Federal Reserve banksters, the pedo cabal trying to control us all through their form of central bank originated and controlled digital money. And I would argue that all of the efforts that you see in the banks now trying to do blockchain stuff to take over Bitcoin are failing. And it's just cool as hell. So as the banks go, we will be left with gold, silver, Bitcoin, and us guys trying to do business and the banks out of the way.
Good, good. Well, thank God, because the banks are at the heart of all evil. And, I've cited for a very long time the 1988 cover of the Rothschild's Economist magazine, in which the phoenix was rising from a burning pile of fiat, and around the phoenix's neck was a gold medallion, said 2018, and the cover of the magazine said, "Get ready for a world currency." That was a 30-year prediction. We're a year away, and I hope to God that their plan is failing. I really do. I hope that the Rothschilds, frankly, get called out for the criminals they are, and the whole lot of the bankers. You guys all know that story. So here's why I love Clif. He mentioned going off-world. I'm looking at my notes that I wrote down prior to this conversation. I wrote down breakaway civilization, and I wrote down Deagle.com. So as far as Depop goes, do you want to address the Deagle.com prediction that I guess in the next 10 years, Deagle.com is suggesting there could be a 60 to 80% decline in the American population, in the United States population. I don't know if that's Fukushima related. I don't know if it's World War III related. I don't know if it's made up out of whole cloth. But as we talk about beating these guys, either humanity rises or humanity gets defeated. We should, I think, address the depopulation issue, and then we'll move on to the breakaway civilization and moving off-world.
Okay, the depopulation thing, we face a number of, as a species, we face a number of threats that could indeed cause major die-offs. We also, though, have to address the idea of the meme of depopulation, because I've never bought the idea that the powers that be want to get rid of humans. I never bought the idea of the Georgia Guidestones, keep your population under 500 million. I think that was a psyop. Because disinfo, because it doesn't do them any good. They need more of us to keep building the base of the power pyramid to keep them up on top.
But we know eugenics is real. We know that the chemical delivery systems through vaccines is real. We know that the GMO foods poisoning us is real. So
those may not be depopulation agendas. Okay,
maybe they're dumbing down agendas.
Correct. Okay, because there is truly a thought on their part, on the part of the pedo elite, that they are superior to us, and this comes from the fact that they think that they are descendant from these beings with the long heads, okay, that were the pharaohs and came on down during that period of time. And basically what happened was there was this war in our solar system. Earth got smashed really bad. We humans were not really part of that war. We're a slave species that was working for the people that were involved in that war. Those individuals that were down here controlling things lived in what we call Northern Africa up through India. That area was destroyed, converted to dust and radioactive rubble. And thereafter, the remnants of those people, of that species, some of them fell to earth. Okay, this is where we get the fallen angels business, right? All of that sort of thing. And much of our religion comes from this idea. This war caused these beings to come down here. They had to try and survive. They were much larger than us. Some of them were extremely larger. Some of them were cannibalistic in that sense, treated us as their food source. We have all of these issues with them. Some of them even interbred with us, okay? And we even have in the 1800s, we have, and I've seen it in Europe. When I would go through, my parents hauled me to every damn art museum you can imagine in Europe to give me culture, right? And so you'd go to some of these art museums and some of these places in Italy and so on, and you'd see pictures, paintings of the leaders of these city-states. And these men and women had elongated skulls with virtually no hair on them. And they wore some funny-looking little hats, but the artist portrayed them with the elongated skulls. And this was, Queen so-and-so, Princess so-and-so. Usually it was shown in the females. The males would have some kind of a wig on, bad wig, but they had these weird elongated skulls. So all of the people that are in the elite, all the way from the Queen Elizabeth, the baby-eating British royals, all of these people, they think that they are part of the descendants from these other beings and therefore are superior to us, the regular humans. Now, the regular humans at the time that disaster took place, the big war, we were beset by all these giants that caused us all kinds of problems. Now we're at that point where we've bred enough that we're able to provide these descendants with their ultimate holy grail. Their ultimate imagining was that they could get a big enough population underneath them to get them back into space, get them back into the off-world reality that they're so desperate to get back into. That was sent, you know, they were basically defeated in a war, and now they're going to rise up from the ashes, so to speak. Now, these guys, the power elite, they don't have 100% knowledge of what was really going on, but they sure know a lot more than we do. So what you've just heard is a stitched together account that's has to be extracted from all different kinds of sources, because they don't tell us this sort of thing.
Right.
But we're in for it this year. That kind of stuff is all coming to a head this year.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that ties back into Pizzagate, and I've made the tie-in to the vampiric bloodlines going back, centuries, but citing Elizabeth Bathory specifically, who loved to bathe in the blood of virgins, believing it gave her youth, and Prince Charles being related to Vlad the Impaler. I mean, it's this vampiric bloodline.
And guess who is in charge of the companies that are now offering, except in the U.S., I don't think it's offered here, but in some places in Europe, you can go and buy teenager blood. And you go and you get an infusion of blood from specifically chosen teenagers to give you that big power thing. And George Soros apparently has this stuff just, stacked in his freezer. That kind of a deal. And if you'll look at those companies, it will lead you right back to the royals. It'll lead you right back to Italian royals and British royals. They own these firms. And so the question has to be asked, since they're already pedos, where are they getting the blood?
My God, it reminds me of George Webb's work and, human trafficking and all these people disappearing. And, again, Pizzagate, all roads lead to Pizzagate, guys. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Prince Charles wanted Jimmy Savile to be the godfather to his sons. Jimmy Savile was a known pedophile at the BBC for decades and decades and decades, and necrophiliac, and all his crimes were covered up. And he was close friends with Prince Charles. He was knighted by the Queen. So when we talk about vampiric bloodlines and these people being, pedophiles, that's not just conjecture. It's just hardcore fact, and it needs to be talked about. Okay, so the breakaway civilization going off-world. I mean, where do we even begin? I mean, you know as well as I do that these people have the technology to go off-world, because supposedly they sent men to the moon on a computer that would have filled my house. The computing power smaller than what I have on an iPhone. So where is all the technology? We can get an iPhone in our pocket now, and the world is at our fingertips in terms of information, but we're all still burning petrol to drive around in automobiles?
That's starting to change, though. They're doing a sneaky thing here, okay? I've been following this ever since I got wind of what is called the Federal Register, which is this large book of contracts and stuff the federal government keeps. And I went looking through it and discovered reverse engineering contracts, all different kinds of cool stuff. But they're starting to do some weird disclosure, a strange form of disclosure now, okay? In the sense that I've seen from the outside all kinds of new devices that, just like the transistor, just like the printed circuit, just like fiber optics, are being introduced into our society. So not to take anything away from the inventors of any of these devices, right? But we're getting hit by all kinds of, let's call them the machining tools of the new age, okay, of the new sci-fi world. Because when you're making cars, before you can build a car, you've got to have a tool to machine the steel. And so that tool has to be a lot tougher than the steel you got to work on. And it's got to be a lot more precise and so on, because it's going to lose a level of precision making a lot of parts. And so we're getting into that level of machine tools for the sci-fi world. So we've got quantum computers coming on out now. We've got all different kinds of material science devices.
3D printers.
Exactly. Well, even beyond that, we now have machines at a manufacturing level that will allow you to design the plastics down to the molecular level that will go into your 3D printer. So if you needed to infuse aluminum into them, you could do that, this kind of thing, right? I mean, we're talking some really spectacular new kinds of devices coming on in. We're talking about devices where it will lead to, in our reports, the ability to like stick a couple of probes into a hole in the ground in your mine and tune in some frequency and cause all of the silver in that particular ore to decide it wanted to liquefy right then and run out through the little channel you dug into the waiting mold you've got. Okay, we're talking frequency engineering. These kind of weird things are starting to come in from the outside. You and I sitting here as consumers, if we don't work in these environments, we're not ever going to see these machines. The people that work in the machines in these environments, just regular guys, going to work every day. The company buys a new machine, they start working it, using it. They have no idea that it's this gradual infusion into our society of all of this space age technology that they've been reverse engineering from space aliens in the deep holes, and they're now deciding they've got to get into our social order. And so I'm seeing that there's new science kind of devices, new high-end, high-tech devices that are coming in now that are functionally as revolutionary as those devices that were used to make printed circuit boards and computer chips. Fab plants is what they're called,
Yeah, cool. Well, Trump has hinted, I think, at some of this. And, we have in the historical record comments from people, like, for instance, Ben Rich at Lockheed Skunk Works, actually, the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, before he died, he said, anything you can imagine we already know how to do. We have the technology to take ET home. I don't know how much of that is true, but, let's say the TR-3B or the TR-4B or these triangular crafts people are seeing all over the planet are of terrestrial origin. What are the chances that they're going to free up that information for humanity? Or do they prefer to enslave humanity and they will continue to go off-world, as I suppose they already have, without us?
Yeah, the latter is their plan, okay? That's why we've got this weird situation with the Faction A, Faction B, the Clintons losing and the pedo camp losing and Trump coming in. I think that there's something that's motivating that battle beyond simply business as usual considerations. I think there's something outside the system that has got them very, very upset, and people decided they've got to do it now just to survive. But insofar as releasing the triangular jobs, those floaty ships in the sky, I see those. I've got 3D or third generation goggles, and I see them at night up there doing their work a couple hundred miles off planet. Now we're starting to get hints in our data sets that we've had it for, I guess, several months, maybe 7 or 8 months. We've had these little snippets coming into the Space Go Fart section about invisible craft that will just be basically hovering and stuff in our atmosphere going on. And so we're going to probably, a lot of them will show up as, a rain cloud comes on over, drops rain, and thus shows you the shape of the craft that's been sitting up there watching you gardening for the last 5 hours, that kind of thing. But will they release them? They don't want to, and I know why they don't want to. We see that in the language all the time. The powers that be are very much afraid because the technology of sci-fi world, even at its most crude, is an extremely leveling technology. So, for instance, if I've got a floaty triangular TR-3B or whatever it is, and I wanted to decide to float on over and drop watermelons in disgust on the Queen, nothing's stopping me, right? I can just get a bunch of watermelons from Georgia, go truck on over to Britain, take me a couple of hours and sit up there and drop watermelons on Buckingham Palace to show my disgust at them. That's very much their issue, is the fact that these things can be weaponized. And that's an extremely crude form of the weaponization, right? So it is a great leveler because in their fear is, and they realize this, that the technology floats us up to their level, so to speak, right? It's the thing that separates us. Now, that never used to be the way it was. In the past, they're progenitors of the space alien infused human line within our species. Actually, these people, because of their skulls and the stuff that was going on, it would be very appropriate to speculate that they had mental powers that would allow them to deal with the local indigenous people, meaning us, the primates, and be able to control us simply through their mental powers. And then over time, as they were trapped here, their mental powers waned because their genetics were no longer pure. Their breeding stock, they had to breed with humans, and it started going down. And so now these people, the descendants of the elongated skulls, today, the kings and queens of the royalty world and all of our royalty and in our corporatocracy, they still believe that they're part of this as well. These guys don't have those powers anymore. The only thing they have separating us from them is technology. So they're desperately afraid of that being lost.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes perfect sense. The technology is too powerful to let the common man access it, so the technology will instead be used to further enslave humanity and control us. I think that makes perfect sense. Now, before we let you go, you've been very generous with your time. I just wanted to ask you about the UFO question and flesh it out just a little bit further. Is there anything in the data set that suggests that some of these UFOs are of a satanic influence and that there is some sort of satanic deception. We already know that these people we've talked about, the elite at the highest levels, are into victimizing children and, human sacrifice and these Illuminati, these vampiric bloodlines. They're into very bad stuff. I've found in my research, Cliff, that at the very highest level, I believe a lot of these people are indeed Luciferians. So if they have somehow harnessed the power of evil and made a deal with the devil, so to speak, is there a chance that there is a UFO deception of which we should be aware as it pertains to Project Bluebeam or just the UFO question in general? How many of them are spiritual, in orientation versus terrestrial?
Right.
Or how many of them are just actually off-world, civilizations visiting us? I don't know. The question needs to be asked, because in my camp, when I do these videos, I have people, there's a very polarizing issue. There's some people that believe it's all a satanic deception and that there are no UFOs, and others believe that we're absolutely being, visited by off-world species. And then there's the question of how many of them are of terrestrial origin.
I know that there are some of terrestrial origin. I suspect that I have reason to state that I think we've been visited by off-world guys, and I think I've seen some of their ships, just because those ships are not like anything I would think a human would build. I mean, they strike you as alien. The satanic stuff is interesting, okay, because that's really a mind filter. So you're going to have a lot of people that in their own mind see the world based on the idea of God, and therefore the anti-God, because it's all duality, right? Every single God has an anti-God. You'll notice that throughout history. There's never, with the exception of the Gnosis, okay, what were those people called? I can't think of it. Hypatia was one of their people. They had the idea of basically like the Jain religion, where there's a non-form energy that you can basically call God. There's no anti-God in those religions, but all the other religions have some form of an anti-God, an antichrist, this kind of thing, right? And so that speaks explicitly to the filters of the people that are bringing that up. So I'm never ever going to say that all UFOs are part of a Luciferian plot. I know that these people that believe in the Lucifer-Christ dichotomy, and that those people that are part of the either side of that, I know that they see a lot of the UFO things, the unidentified aerial phenomenon, as being demonic and so on. That does not mean that they are. Now, the people that are reverse engineering the spaceships and building these things are under the control of this group that we acknowledge are pedophiles, vampiric, energy-sucking, and human flesh-consuming, and indeed are, how do I say that? They're looking for the Luciferian part of it. They think they're making a deal with an entity that is pan-dimensional or whatever. So whatever their delusion is, they're acting on it as though it were real. But I don't accept that it's real. Just as I don't accept that the Christian filter is real in that sense. Yes, they believe it. Yes, it's real to them. But my vision is larger, so I'm outside that. I can see a little bit more, right? And so I'm not bound by that vision. Now, I know that the manifestations that we're seeing in the skies, these unidentified aerial phenomenon, include things that we would not classify as a spaceship. It's got no rivets, it's not welded or any of that kind of stuff. I also know that it does include those things that we've riveted and welded together. But I'm of the opinion that the things that are not are welded ships. So we're looking at a duality. We have the stuff we've built, and then we have the stuff that we haven't built, some of which resembles our stuff, but other stuff is like probably some form of a nano skin kind of a technology. Others, it's probably energetic, and you're inside an energy bubble and you've got some kind of a control, that sort of a thing. But it comes down to this. There's this weird movie, Men Who Stare at Goats, okay? In that movie, they talk about all of the consciousness field stuff, consciousness science. They're talking as remote viewing and all these other kinds of things. They made that movie to denigrate and bring humorous focus on a very serious subject for the military. The military does this stuff continuously. They've been doing it since the 60s. They never gave it up. And some of their people have retired, some of the people that were in that deep, dark world. I know some of these people. I've talked to a few of them. One of the guys that is retired from that world is this fellow that all the others in that world really respect. His name's Lynn Buchanan. Lynn Buchanan has a phrase that really struck me as, or a saying that's really brilliant in my estimate for this particular situation, because here's what he's done. He says, you don't want to think about UFOs. You don't want to think about space aliens the way we've been doing it. What you do is you want to think about things in an entirely different viewpoint. You want to draw a line and say, here is humanity, and we are this psychic, and all other beings, and yes, there are space aliens, and yes, we're involved with them. And you can call them interdimensional. It doesn't, the label is immaterial, but we're dealing with beings that are either more psychic than humans or less psychic than humans. Of those that are less psychic than humans, there are those that are just friendly, nice guys, and then there are those that are nasty fellows. The nasty fellows that are less psychic than us, they don't show up here, okay? Occasionally we get the ones that are less psychic than us and that are friendly, just out touristing, they come through. Now, you got those aliens that are more psychic than us, and of those, you have those that don't like us at all and want us dead, want to get rid of us, all right? These guys are more psychic than us at this moment, is Lynn's estimation, okay? You've got the others that are more psychic than us that like us, and they are more psychic than us at this moment. And it's that at this moment that's the key, because we don't know our own psychic power. And so as a result of that, you have some of these space aliens that are much more psychic than us that are just itching to get us out of this slump and get us clued into consciousness science, because they know we'll just be a huge kick-ass force out in the universe and they can use the help. You got the other ones that are more psychic than us at this moment that don't like us a bit because of that same reason.
Wow. All right, well, that's some serious woo, but I think it all is important to the conversation as it relates to what's really going on. And, Cliff, as I've done my research, my spiritual faith has been really increased because of, and I just want to quote Ephesians 6:12, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And there's absolutely no better example of that than the Pizzagate, Pedagate issue. And I really would like to think that I'm not bound by the constraints of dogma. When I've come to the conclusion that these people really are Luciferians and they worship a dark power, and I'm aligned with the light and, Jesus Christ in the story of Christianity, and, we can all have differing opinions. None of us have to believe the same thing, but at the end of the day, I want people to know that our enemies definitely believe in a dark power. They worship that power, and they believe that dark power gives them extreme power in their own right in this world, in this realm. And those are the people we need to defeat. That's why Pizzagate's so important. And a little bit of a rant there, Cliff. But,
no, that's fine.
I'll give you the last word.
Let's bring up Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble.
Procter & Gamble, PG, Pizzagate. I love it.
Yep.
All right. Well, Cliff, I've been following you for so very long. We very much appreciate you and your work. Everybody can check you out at halfpasthuman.com. Can you tell people about the best way to support you? Is the best way to support you to come over and buy an Alter report?
Yeah, if they're up for it, okay. You got to understand it's very dense. It's difficult to read sometimes because I have to describe the language that's coming in. I don't just write out the language that's coming in. That would be like prophecy. What I'm doing is showing you my methodology. So the best way you can support us would be to, watch the videos of all the free media guys and get those AdSense revenues pouring into these people. And then come on over and buy a report if you're of a mind for it. But bear in mind, it's, not necessarily fun reading.
And your YouTube channel's absolutely taken off. Like your Google videos, 37,000 hits already, and congratulations on that. It just goes to show that people know you're the real McCoy. You have a nature about yourself that is so amiable and warm, and that's what people love about you, Cliff. I mean, it's easy to tell who the truth tellers are because their tree bears fruit, and you're one of the truth tellers, and I really do thank you so much for being a truth teller. Thanks for all you do.
Well, thank you much. I mean, for noticing. I really do try my damnedest.
Yeah, I know you do. Well, guys, if you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, please hit the like button and share it within your own sphere of influence. Clif High, you can visit him at halfpasthuman.com and subscribe to his YouTube channel, which I believe is Clif High, right?
Correct.
Clif High on YouTube. Clif High has been our guest. Cliff, thanks.